Can you translate some of this Entish tongue that I'm about to utter?
I'd be glad to. Uh-huh. When a chainsaw is fired up in the presence of a tree, that's what you will hear if you had the ability to hear a tree.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing man. Welcome to the Undergrowth. This is where we speak to celebrated scientists and eminent educators about plants and pests. Let us embrace knowledge together on this expedition into mysterious realms. I am Sebastian Eugene Bartholomew, and this is the Undergrowth. Today on the program, I have the distinct pleasure to welcome Dr. Jeff Iles, an extension horticulturist, professor, and department chair at the Royal Academy of Iowa State University. Dr. Iles leads the famous Hort Department, which we all know is an acronym for Helping Out Rotting Trees. Is that not correct, Dr. Iles?
It is not correct, but it could be the new mantra for us.
So it was almost a win then?
It was almost a win.
I will count it as one.
Very good, sir.
Well, today we are going to be discussing abiotic or non-living disorders to the trees that we all know and love that surround us in yards and gardens and parks. But before we begin, let's find out a little bit about our intrepid interviewee today. Tell our adventurous listeners out there how you climbed to the heights of horticulture from your early days running an illicit maple syrup tapping operation in the seedy suburbs of Detroit.
There is a lot of maple syrup in Detroit, but thank you, Sebastian, for having me on the program. It's an honor to be here. I am from suburban Detroit, so you might wonder, how does somebody from Detroit end up as a horticulturist? Dumb luck, kismet, if you will. But I went to Michigan State for my undergraduate degree, Penn State for my master's degree, and finally PhD from Iowa State, all those degrees in horticulture, and the rest is history, as they say. But it's a pleasure being here. I've enjoyed working at Iowa State, and this might be the pinnacle of my career this morning.
Those are indeed honorable words from an honorable man. I've got a little game that we can start things out with. Normally I ask a question to get into the psyche of our interviewee, but today it's going to be a little bit of a game show. I'm going to utter parts of a famous quotation, and you, as a tree expert, must finish it.
I'm game.
There are 4 questions, 4 quotes, which you'll have the chance to finish. You win the grand prize if you get but 25% of them.
I like my odds.
This first one is by Sir Isaac Newton. If I have seen further, it is only by standing on the shoulders of blank.
Small trees.
Small trees. Well, I can see how a little bit further over shrubberies and such, but I'm sorry, it's wrong. It's, if I have seen further, it is only by standing on the shoulders of giant sequoias.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, give me another chance.
So far, 0 for 1. This one is more recent, JFK. Ask not what your blank can do for you, but what you can do for your blank.
Well, what you can do for your shade tree.
You are eminently close, but disastrously wrong.
Okay.
JFK actually said, ask not what your forest can do for you, but what you can do for your forest.
Okay, I like that.
Maybe I heard differently than you?
Perhaps. I was alive when he was alive. But let's carry on.
0 for 2 so far.
Thank you.
The grand prize ebbs ever out of reach. But you have 2 more tries. This one is by Bill Shakespeare, an old friend of the English language. To blank or not to blank, that is the question.
Well, obviously, Shakespeare was talking about pruning, so it's to prune or not to prune. That is the question.
Oh, Dr. Iles. As everyone knows who's ever read any Shakespeare at all, it is to tree or not to tree. That is the question. Your mind must be on trees.
Alas, poor York.
This is the last one by Tennyson. 'Tis better to have blanked and lost than to have never blanked at all.
Now I'm intimidated, I have to admit. But I will say it is better to have planted a tree than to have never planted a tree at all.
That's very close. And I think that's actually what Tennyson meant when he said, "'Tis better to have leafed and lost than to have never leafed at all." We are going to call that a win.
Thank you.
Well, this leads us to our topic, abiotic tree stresses and keeping trees healthy around yards, gardens, parks, and other places people like to go. Dr. Iles, why is tree health so important?
Think about this, Sebastian. When you plant a tree, you're hoping that tree has a long and productive life.
Indeed.
All too often, though, trees live shortened lives that sometimes are the cause of insects and diseases, but other times their lives are shortened because of human activities. So when you plant that tree, you want 100 years, or 50, or 60. And so there are some things we can do to help trees along, to have them enjoy the longest life that they can. That's extremely important. Think about the investment in time and in money.
Right.
Planting a tree, and all of that can be wasted if we don't nurture that tree and take care of it in its early years.
Yes.
Like a child.
Well, describe some common abiotic tree stresses, Dr. Iles.
Well, as we sit here this morning out in the heat of an Iowa summer, heat and drought stress is right at the top of my list of abiotic stresses.
Right.
That's difficult on woody plants. Woody plants are stuck in the landscape. They can't move inside, they can't seek shelter, and so they must cope with the vagaries of, in this case, the Iowa climate. Heat in the summer, cold in the winter. Imagine the temperature swings that we get in this part of the world. 100 degrees, 120 degree swings in temperature. That's a lot for any plant to withstand, and yet we have great success with plants provided we choose the right ones for the landscape. So it's temperature that is the number one abiotic stress. However, people rear their ugly heads sometimes. So the misuse of lawnmowers or lawn maintenance equipment damaging the base of trees is a classic abiotic, non-living, if you will, stress that can be prevented by careful use of said equipment, or perhaps by using mulch around plants to keep the lawn equipment at bay.
All right, so explain to our listeners out there the difference between an abiotic and a biotic stress.
Right. Rather cumbersome terms, but when I say biotic stress, I'm talking about a living entity, an insect, a plant pathogen. And in many cases, these things can either spread or increase in numbers. So these are
child with an axe?
Child with an axe. That's a great question. Is a child with an axe an abiotic or a biotic stressor?
I think it would be more of a cyborgic stressor, as it requires both biological tissue and a mechanical apparatus with which to damage that tree.
I like it.
We'll go with it.
Yes, we will. But again, biotic stressors, insects and diseases. Abiotic, again, things you really can't see, things that don't increase in numbers over time. So temperature, again, being that classic example. Sometimes herbicide misapplication could be considered an abiotic stress.
I believe you.
So we must be careful. Again, the human activity factors into some of these.
So how do we mitigate some of these human factor-caused items that damage trees?
Well, I've spent a career trying to educate young minds and more advanced minds, and so it really comes down to education. That's the beauty of a land-grant institution like Iowa State.
Indeed, the Royal Academy.
Yes, we educate the young people. We also educate their parents, grandparents, people out in the state. Everybody in the state of Iowa is a potential client of ours, and so we try to extend our knowledge outward.
Speaking of this knowledge, what are some practical ways that people can avoid abiotic tree stresses?
Well, knowing something about the plants that you're using in your landscape can help. We know that plants require water to fulfill all of their biologic duties. And so during times of heat and stress, we can provide moisture. Sounds simple, but it's often neglected. Again, we can eliminate unnecessary wounding to plants. Getting the right plant in the right site. So if you're going to plant a tree in your front yard, choose the right plant. You don't want a plant that's going to overwhelm the site.
Right.
You would never plant a large sycamore, which is behind us, by the way, in a small postage-size stamped yard. You would plant a smaller tree. So there's lots of things that go into choosing trees, getting them on the site, and then planting them correctly, which is another huge topic we could talk about at some future date. But there's lots of things that have to fall into place for a plant to have that long lifespan that we talked about early on.
Speaking of all of these intrepid activities that plant parents can do to help out their front yard plant zoo, where can one go if they need some information about proper site selection, planting depth cultivar selection, or any other topic they wish to know?
You know, the Iowa State University has a number of wonderful websites. And if they simply went to the ISU Extension page and in the search engine typed in some of the words that you articulated just a few seconds ago, all kinds of things will pop up. So there's a wealth of information here at Iowa State. And then, of course, people can always call some of the specialists in my department. I love to talk to the common man and woman out there on the street. It keeps me in touch with people.
Sage words, Dr. Iles. Well, I think it's time we branch out here, eh? What can you tell us about tree pruning? Why is it important?
I love tree pruning. For one, it's a great exercise. It gets you out in the landscape. It's good for the body, the mind, the soul, but it's good for the plant. We can help train a young tree like you would train a young pet, a dog, a cat, if you will, by proper tree pruning. Unfortunately, a lot of folks don't pay attention to pruning. They ignore it. They're not even aware that it's something that has to be done.
They don't know the deep pleasure of lopping off a living limb to better their souls.
I love the way you articulate that, sir. It makes me want to grab some loppers right now.
I dedicate it to you.
Thank you.
Trademark.
Pruning, though, I mean, it's critically important. And it's something that should be done on a regular basis. You don't prune when the tree is 30 years old for the first time. You look at it when it's young, and you make corrections as the tree goes, so you're not taking off a lot of tissue at any one time, but critically important.
Indeed. Harkens back to your analogy of training a tree is like training a child. Small corrections are necessary when young in order to avoid more larger painful corrections when one is older.
My father was subscribed to that theory. Many corrections.
Right.
Daily.
Daily?
Daily.
Perhaps there was a problem with the sapling he was trying to train.
No doubt. I accept my share of the blame.
I run into that same thing with my own father.
We all do. It's a curse, but a blessing. Imagine if you didn't have the strong hand of a parental figure.
I would be back in jail again. I mean, for the first time. What is the best practical joke you have ever played upon a tree?
That's a great question, Sebastian. There's so many jokes you can play on these objects that can't move, but I like to sneak up on them from behind, which is a problem because you don't know what from behind is.
Right.
But if you sneak up from them from behind and pluck a leaf,
Yes.
and then show it to them, it's great fun.
Indeed, indeed. Oh, I suppose it scares some more leaves off of their trunk, eh?
Unless the tree that we're talking about has thorns, and then the joke is on me.
Right. This is only a joke that would work in the summertime, correct?
Yes, there are some trees though that do hang on to their leaves through winter. We have a term for that.
Carnivorous, right?
No, the term is marcescence. Some trees hang on to their leaves, oaks for example,
Right.
during the winter. It's fascinating.
Indeed it is. Why do they do that? In an attempt to keep warm?
There's a number of theories. One is that it might prevent herbivory, animals chewing on the buds, so it kind of protects the buds that will become leaves for the following year. There's some thought that it rains down organic matter in the spring of the year when they eventually do fall off. But it's fascinating. You ask a great question. Why do some trees do this and others don't? A mystery.
A mystery? An opportunity for some young professor to become tenured?
Probably not. That might get you thrown out of the academy. That would take a long time to sift through those data.
Sift through the fallen leaves of information that...
Yeah, well said.
Thank you. Well said yourself, Dr. Iles. Our conversation reminds me of the halcyon days I spent as an anti-tree poaching agent working to save the living woods of the university here. Oh, I remember dropping down from my treetop stakeout into the midst of armed men wielding axes and chainsaws, and I with only a stout oaken cudgel and the mighty intellect of man with which to save my own skin and the bark of the trees of those around me. Sleepless nights spent staking out, the cold snow falls, the torturous sun that burned itself upon my very soul, as we spent saving those trees with the tenacity of an insulted dryad. Is that what it feels like to be an extension horticulturist, Dr. Iles?
Yes, and more, and more. You did not mention the scourge on the landscape that is presented by people that hammock in trees. Are you aware of this?
I have seen those folks who are hammocking.
I'm not a killjoy.
Indeed not.
I love people having fun, getting out and enjoying nature, but when you tie constricting devices around the trunks of trees, you run the risk of danger. Might I say an abiotic stress.
Whatever shall we do? Shall we make these hammock devices illegal?
A bit heavy-handed.
A bit heavy-handed?
A bit heavy-handed.
Shall we go out with a pair of scissors and cut the hammock hangers as they join the tree?
Great fun, but again, a bit over the top.
Yes, indeed.
On this campus, we have made an effort to install metal posts for them to connect their hammocks to. Unfortunately, we don't have enough to satisfy the demand for hammocking, but it's a small step. Again, I think it goes back to education, educating the hammockers about the potential damage they could be doing. Right. And most of the young people on this campus will gladly accept those words of caution.
Right, right. As a tree daddy, which of your tree children is your favorite?
Oh, I was trying to remember the other day how many trees I might have planted in my life. Over thousands, I mean, just thousands. But maybe my favorite is the tree that I haven't planted yet.
Ooh, philosophical.
Because I have lots of trees yet to plant.
Indeed.
And there's so many opportunities. So I don't know if I can answer that one, but ask me that on my deathbed and I'd be glad to try again.
Will you email me when you're on your deathbed so I can...
I will.
Okay.
I will have plenty of opportunity to do that, I'm sure. It runs in my family.
Perhaps we can get some sap on each of our fingers from a tree and we can become sap brothers?
I would relish that opportunity.
Oh, indeed. Can you teach our listeners some of the more useful Entish language words that you have picked up?
Entish?
Entish, a term for the living trees of Middle-earth, coined by our compatriot, Dr. Tolkien.
Sorry. It's been a while since I perused the pages of Tolkien.
Right.
I don't know if I have words that I use to describe my woody friends, and these are woody friends.
Right.
But they are mysterious, and they're ever-changing. When you think about a tree in the woods or a tree even in a home landscape, it's constantly evolving. It never presents the same visage 2 days in a row. Always different. Changelings, maybe. It's a great question that I'm not sure I answered.
Well, we all try our best to do our best.
We do.
Can you translate some of this Entish tongue that I'm about to utter?
I'd be glad to. When a chainsaw is fired up in the presence of a tree, that's what you will hear if you had the ability to hear a tree.
Right.
Yeah.
Listeners, we have exceeded our brain capacity on this epic conversation with Dr. Jeff Iles. Oh, I extend a keen and provocative thank you for all of the knowledge that you have shared with us today.
It has been my pleasure, sir. Thank you.
I'm Sebastian Eugene Bartholomew, and this is The Undergrowth. This is my favorite one.
If you could do something with this,